participants. A very good
So
afternoon.
Prabhdeep, it is not live yet. Wait.
I need to ask something. I sent my PPT. So will it be operated from your side?
No, ma'am. We can operate it if you want, but you
want
can
me
also
to
do it.
open it?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay.
Pradeep, you can begin.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and participants, a very good afternoon to everyone. I am Supradeep Das, a research intern at the Institute of Chinese Studies, and I am the Master of Ceremonies for today's session. It is my great privilege and honor to welcome you all to today's Wednesday seminar. Our gathering for today revolves around the intricate relationship between China and Russia. The topic of today's seminar is the romance of the two kingdoms, Sino-Russian energy relations. Today, we embark on a journey through the fascinating and multifaceted relationship between two global giants, China and Russia, including the legacy of the former Soviet Union. Over the past 50 years, these nations have experienced a roller coaster of emotions, oscillating between amity and hostility. In our contemporary world, their interactions are defined by mixed emotions marked by enduring inhibitions and unspoken animosities. Energy, particularly natural gas, has emerged as a central player in this dynamic, addressing China's pressing need for cleaner energy sources. Simultaneously, both nations recognize the strategic importance of their alliance, facilitated by pipelines, oil for loan schemes, and Chinese investment in eastern Siberia. This partnership sets the stage for a new era in geopolitics. This seminar will delve into this intricate relationship, exploring its profound implications for the present and future in international relations. The speaker for today's discussion is Dr. Prachi Agarwal, an assistant professor at the University of Delhi. She has written for various columns and online websites and also has published papers in reputed journals. Her recent publications include China's Energy Security, The Journey from Self-Sufficiency to Global Investor, which was published in 2022, and China's Energy Security, The Domestic Discussion. Today's session will be chaired by Professor Alka Acharya, who is the Honorary Director of the ICS and Chairperson at the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Professor Acharya's extensive academic contributions bear testament to her expertise and scholarship in the realm of international relations. She most recently edited a notable volume titled Boundaries and Borderlands, a century after the 1914 Shimla Convention, a work published by Routledge in 2023, and is the joint editor of the book Crossing a Bridge of Dreams, 50 Years of India-China. She has authored a book titled China and India, Politics of Incremental Engagement, published in 2008. Now, before I hand over to the chair, I would like to request all the participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All the participants will be muted during the seminar. Questions can be posted in the chat box, or you can also use the raised hand option to ask your questions during the Q&A session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself and ask your question. I shall now hand over the floor to Professor Acharya to take the proceedings forward. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Supradeep, for that introduction. That saves us a lot of time. And very good afternoon to all the participants to this Wednesday seminar who have joined us. It gives me immense pleasure to chair this session by one of our new emerging dynamic young scholars, Prachi Agarwal, who is going to speak on a very interesting topic. I think the Sino-Russian relations are exciting a great deal of debate, talk, controversy even. And I think what Prachi is going to do is shed light on a very critical component of this relationship, which actually could be the bond that brings these two partners in a strategic alliance. I must also add here that Prachi is the latest in a line of presentations by young scholars that the ICS has sought to encourage. The Institute gives a platform to the new emerging scholars to showcase their recent work. And more importantly, to bring to the notice of people outside that there is an immense variety of work that is taking place in our universities and among our research scholars on China and East Asia. And in this line, we had, at least if we just look at the last 8-10 months, we had some very interesting young people who came and spoke. Barnali from Bangalore, Jitme from Sikkim, Sugandha who's in JNU, Prashant Kumar Singh who's in IDSA, Devendra Sharma who's in SNU, Peter Hudson who's formerly DU but sitting in Japan, and Tilak Jha who's in Bennett Coleman University. So you can see the range of scholars that have spoken on our platform on a range of issues located in different institutions. And it is our hope that the ICS will be the platform to bring them to the notice of a wider audience. So with that, let me request Prachi to come and speak on her rather tantalizingly titled talk, The Romance of the Two Kingdoms. And I think she'll tell us exactly what are the positives in the romance and what are the issues that are likely to make the romance go sour. So over to you, Prachi.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the wonderful introduction. It's especially nice to be called a young scholar even at this age. It really boosts up your confidence. So I'll just be sharing my screen. Please do inform if it's visible. Huh?
Yeah.
It was visible a short while back.
It was Sugandha's. We can share it if you want.
Yeah, please do if you can. I somehow
Okay,
there is
okay, okay,
glitch
okay,
happening here today.
okay.
Okay.
And you
please.
can always indicate when you want the slide changed.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I hope you are able to see.
Yeah, I am able.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I can see now. Okay. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Chair. Thank you to ICS for this. And I welcome all of you for this topic. And first of all, I would like to really pay my regards to the person from whom I have taken this title. The Romance of the Two Kingdoms is actually a wordplay on the topic, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It's a novel by Lu Kuan-chung. So from his side, I am from his very famous novel, which is called which is a cult in classical Chinese literature. I have taken the wordplay of The Romance of the Two Kingdoms and tried to intersperse with current geopolitical trends. Slide change, please. Change, please. Yeah. So as we all know that energy is the core national interest of China. And when it comes to something called a core national interest of China, so China engages in two things, one thing that is called energy diplomacy. Now, energy diplomacy is of two kinds. One, where the main aim of the diplomacy is to secure energy, and the other is that where energy is the main activity to advance your diplomatic motives. Now, when it comes to China and Russia, we can see that when I say that diplomacy's main aim is energy, that is something which China does, that it uses its diplomatic cohort, or it uses its diplomatic power to procure energy fuels. And when I say that energy is the main activity to advance diplomatic interest, it is often done by the resource-rich nations, something like Russia, who know that they have something which the world is demanding, and they use that to advance their own diplomatic interest. Now, if energy is a core national interest, now, whenever you have a core national interest, it means that the government proactively does something to get something. So what is it doing? it is engaging in ODI, outbound direct investment. And to get what? To get energy. And when I say get energy, it does not just get limited itself to securing fuel supplies. It also means controlling of trade routes. And how does China do that? China does that by engaging in ODI, as I've said before. Now, ODI meaning outbound direct investment, meaning it engages in soft loans, it provides soft loans, it builds up infrastructure, it builds up a blue water navy, and through all this process, it tries to engage with resource-rich nations and secure the fuel as well as the trade routes. Now, for this purpose, it launches various policy initiatives. As we know, the Go Out policy or the Sochu Tree that was launched in 2000 by China, or the latest BRI initiative. They are not specifically meant for energy, but energy definitely forms a very major component of all these policies. But if you notice, something very common in the two is that whether it's Go Out or BRI, they're all multilateral approaches. Multilateral approaches meaning that when it comes to energy matters, you are engaging with a number of countries. But what country other than China will know better that when it comes to core national interest, it has to engage with countries as well as engage with them through their own and deal with them as per their characteristics, which means that if it has to deal with Africa, it will deal as per African characteristics. And if it has to deal with countries like Russia, it will deal as per Russian characteristics. And this is one thing Chinese are very adept at doing. So when we come to energy, China is often faced with an issue of self-sufficiency versus energy security. Self-sufficiency means that China is sufficient enough to produce produce whatever it has to consume. It does not have to depend upon other nations for its consumptions. This was something which was lost by China in 1993 when it became the net importer of oil. When this happened, however, despite losing self-sufficiency, China gained in energy security from that time onwards, because that was a time that China gained, but that China began to open up, and it has not just opened up from 78 onwards, it has also gained from in its bilateral relations with all the major nations of the world, especially those possessing energy resources. Now, before I move forward, I would like to talk about that. Why are we discussing today's topic? Why the focus is on Russia? It is not just because Russia is a resource-rich nation that we are talking about it. The reason I'm discussing Russia when it comes to energy is, one, it was Russians who laid down the base of China's energy industry way back in the 50s. They were the ones who had actually laid down the foundation of the basic energy industry in China. And today, if I compare, then Russia is the only country which can single-handedly deal with China's avarice. The energy avarice that China has, given that it's one of the fastest growing economies, then the energy avarice that China has, Russia is the only country in the entire world that can single-handedly deal with it. So that is why we are discussing this topic. Change, please. As I titled it as the romance of the two kingdoms, let me first just specify what are the two kingdoms. In energy terms, when we talk about China, we're talking about China's state energy companies, which are namely CNPC, Sinopec. CNPC is also called PetroChina, Sinopec, and CNOOC. There are also other, these collectively are called national oil companies. There are also other Chinese companies. However, some of them are private in nature, so we do not talk much about it. But the helm of the affairs is dealt by them. And the Russian equivalent of these energy companies are Gazprom, Rosneft, and Transneft. We will be focusing on Gazprom more because of certain reasons which will be discussed later. There are also other Russian companies like Lukoil, Novatek, and all these other Russian companies, or Yukos. But again, in terms of volume of trade, they do not have much of a say. Hence, we are talking about these countries. Now, China has 4 gateways through which energy can enter into, or any supply of any product enters into China. In the context of energy and in the context of Sino-Russian relations, we are going to deal with 2 areas. One is the Northeast China and the other is the Xinjiang area. Northeast China is the Heilongjiang area and the other is the Xinjiang area, and they are connected via Central Asia through Russia in Eastern Siberia and Western Siberia. So these are the 2 nations, let us say supply routes through which China and Russia collaborate. Next, please. As we discussed the romance, let me first go back slightly to a history. Sino-Russian relations have had a tumultuous phase of political alliance. And this tumultuousness was exhibited primarily not just in political terms, but also in energy terms. So in the first phase, which was called the friendship phase, or as in Chinese, we say the Yo-Hao phase. This Yo-Hao phase was very essential. As I said before, that the base of the energy industry was laid down by the Russians. Remember, this was the time when Chinese were affected by the system of self-sufficiency. That is Syli, they used to say. And they said that they were isolated by the world. And they said that we don't need anyone. We are capable enough to produce whatever we want to consume. And hence, if the world doesn't need us, we don't need them. Now, in this phase, Russians were the only ones that were trusted. Energy bases were laid down in Huapei in Northeast China, and 156 energy projects were launched at that time solely because they were only Russian assistance was available to them. Mao at that time had commissioned the 19th Battalion of PLA to engage in exploratory engineering of petroleum industry, so that under Soviet help, and hence at that time Russian engineers had come and they had explored the Kansu petroleum resources to know if they are to exploit those 80 factory. So the reason I'm saying all these instances of Kansu petroleum reserves and 156 projects was that at one point of time when the Chinese were not trusting anyone, they trusted the Russians and they trusted their petroleum reserves with the Russians. So this was the time, the Soviets at that point of time. So this was the time which was a very, very, you could say a Yo-Hao period or a friendship period between the two. This bonhomie was definitely affected in the 60s and the 70s phase, which was actually Lunchan, the jingoistic phase, or the Tuekhang, the antagonistic phase. These 2 phases, when even there was a brief war between Russia and China, these were the 2 phases at that time when no form of collaboration, political or energy terms, happened between China and Russia. Then came the time of 1978 to 1989, which is called the conciliation phase or the Tuehua phase. This was the time when China had begun to ease up. It had economic reforms. It had Tuehua Kaifang, open door policy. It was a time when Brezhnev in 82 had recognized that, okay, Taiwan will be a part of China. And it was a time when Russia had invaded Afghanistan, and they wanted support from a third world country because they were receiving flak from the entire world. And hence at that point, this became the conciliation phase where the 2 countries started talking to each other. Then, by the way, the words I'm saying, friendship, jingoistic, antagonistic, conciliation phase, this is not my terminology. It's the terminology given by the Chinese minister Qian Qichen. This is how he had categorized Sino-Russian relations in a white paper document. Then 92-99, China, Russia declared themselves as strategic partners. And this was the point of time when the energy companies, particularly the CNPC, they had begun to play a proactive role in engaging with Russia, not just through government, but not just through politics or government, but also company to company basis. So CNPC's CEO, the head of CNPC in 94, Chang Yong-yi, he offered oil exports. He said that, okay, we offer you oil exports from Russia to Japan via China. He offered that Russia could export oil to China via Japan. And in 96, both China and Russia signed an energy sector cooperation committee. And in 97, Gazprom signed MOU on gas. Now, Gazprom, I want to say something about Gazprom so that you get a background of why Gazprom plays a major role. Gazprom is a state energy company of Russia. China and Russia are connected through two routes, the Siberian route, the Eastern Siberian route, and the Altai route or the Western Siberian route. Now, problem with Gazprom is that it does not hold any assets at the border areas. And it is a state energy company, but it does not hold any assets at the border areas. So the problem is that for China wants to engage with a state energy company and the company does not hold assets. So this leads to problems in execution. A deal could be signed and MOUs could be signed, but when it comes to execution, problems started happening between the two countries. And Chinese at that point of time, they were very hell-bent that they would only engage with the state-endorsed energy companies and not any other companies. So 99 comes a good neighborliness policy. And this good neighborliness meant that no matter the political or the economic issues between them, the two countries would definitely engage in laying down of pipelines and joint exploration of oil and gas fields. Now, the Gazprom issue, however, still continued as an irritant between the two countries. So 2006, Russia passes a statute where it says that Gazprom is going to have a monopoly over all the exports of Russian gas. So wherever Russia will export, Gazprom is going to play a major role between the two, between any of the two nations. That is why currently, when Russia was exporting a lot of material to European Union, Gazprom was a major player amongst it. Then 2007 came the period when Eastern areas supply would be there, and this was launched under the Eastern Gas Program, and this was passed by Russian Ministry of Energy again to ease out Gazprom's association with other countries. And coming by the time they came down to 2009, 2010, the Hu Jintao period. It was a very, very beautiful period between the two countries in terms of energy because they had MOUs, they had the breakthroughs, not just in oil, but in coal, in nuclear, and in the electricity sector. There was a cooperation between the State Grid Corporation of China and the Electricity Grid Corporation of Russia, as well as they jointly invested not just in Chinese oil fields, but also started jointly invested in Bankhar, Sakhalin oil and gas fields. They started mining together and working together on it. So by 2010, Russia became the 11th largest partner of China, and China became the 3rd largest partner of Russia in the trade partner of Russia. Next slide, please. Next, please. I cannot see. No. Another scheme that works between Russia and China is an oil for loan scheme. This simply means that we pay today to get Russian oil tomorrow. I have listed a number of oil for loan schemes that happened between the two nations. For example, $25 billion were given to Russian companies like Rosneft and Transneft China Exim Bank gave $300 million to Gazprom Bank of Russia, and China Exim Bank also gave $700 million to Russian Foreign Exchange Bank. Then Eastern Energy Company of China got a mining license in Irkutsk, and not just state energy companies, private companies like China Huaxin also engaged with Petronas. And this Eastern Energy Company, it actually has a stake where Russia has a stake of 51% and China has a stake of 49%. So, and this happened. And also a lot of other engagements were happening between various companies between China and Russia. And when I say oil for loan, it does not necessarily mean that oil for loan happened only for oil. It was actually done for all kinds of energy, whether coal or nuclear. In fact, in coal, I would like to point out that coal also at the 6% rate, $6 billion were invested for a 25-year of coal import supply till 2035. And both countries engaged in this. Now, however, before talking about coal, I would like to point out that why China is doing this. China is doing this for a number of reasons. One, it is giving money because it's giving a loan. So it knows that it can get an assured supply for a certain number of years. For example, if as China, if I'm giving money to Russia, I am assured of a continuous period of supply of oil for a certain number of years, as well as I gain money from it through albeit a generous but a small form of interest. So that is one of my agenda that I am engaging in this oil for loan scheme. Second is that I am giving money for oil purchase. I am giving money for pipeline laydown, and I want those pipelines, my infrastructure of pipelines, should be utilized to its full capacity, which means that I want Russia to dig deeper into its oils and give me a continuous supply of oil and not tell me that the shortage of resources. Now, when it comes to coal, as I was pointing out the previous time, now coal for loan or energy for loan or coal for loan is also a part of oil for loan, in the sense that both countries, they are oil-rich countries, or they are coal-rich countries. Hence, they do not actually utilize the coal coming from the other country. However, what they do is that, for example, Shanhua Corporation is engaging in a coal to oil conversion program in Russia's Berymoksy coal mine. So, in a way, this coal for loan is also a small part or a subcommittee of the oil for loan program. So we could say that, and plus when it comes to coal, since both countries are coal-rich nations, there are better coal relations between the two countries. A, because coal is not in that high demand as is oil or gas. And secondly, because China is paying for coal much better than the Russian expectation as it compared to oil or gas. Hence, they are also engaging in a coal to oil conversion program. So we can see that they are engaging in all these kinds of oil for loan schemes to ensure that the pipeline functions to the full capacity, and secondly, they get an assured supply for a continuous number of years, as well as earn money through interest on it. Next slide, please. Now, there are certain regrets, or you could say problems, that Russia is facing, because of which it is engaging in these oil for loan schemes. One of them is the pricing issue. Now, it is said that now before China, it was the European Union that was engaging that was buying oil or gas from Russia in a bulk. However, the price at that time was $3 to $4 MCF. Now Russia is facing this problem that the price issue, it wants more Russian. The issue is that when it comes to Asia, Russia was selling oil at $95 per barrel, or you could say 14 to 16 MCF, $14 to $16 per MCF. But when it went to Russia, when it went to Europe, it was selling oil at the rate of $3 to $4 per MCM. China, on the other hand, because of this price issue, managed to get a balance between the two, and it got money at the rate of $10 to $11 MCM, which means that it got something lesser than Asia, but it was still paying more than what the European countries are paying. So price issue has always been a major factor in Russia, which is why it is inching more towards China way before the Ukraine action happened, because it realized that China in any ways was paying much more than what currently at that point of time before Ukraine, the Europe was paying. Second is the US angle. US-Russia angles have always been very stiff, and there has always been political discontent between them. However, that is the political angle. But when it comes to the economic angle was that US has lots of shale gas reserves, which it has preserved for its future use. And Russia fears that if US shale gas comes down into the market, the demand for its gas might go down, might dwindle down. So this is one of the problems that Russia is facing, and it does not want the market to become a buyer's market. The third issue that Russians are facing is the lost trade monopoly. Russian reserves are dwindling. One is that, and second problem is that Iran has been brought back from its isolation. And when these things happen, then at that point of time, Russia feels that it is that world might be shifting from a gas-based economy to a probably cleaner source of energy, and it is maybe. It is not, you could say it would be the near future when most countries demand cleaner source of energy and shift towards nuclear or other sources of energy. Hence, Russia feels that it is losing out on its trade monopoly. One, because Iran might be slowly being brought back from its isolationism, and secondly, Central Asia, where Russians, which did whatever according to Russian diktats, are also started asserting more and have begun to listen to other countries like China more than what the Russians are saying. Then the next point I was talking about was domestic politics. As I said, that Gazprom was a state energy company, and it was given various advantages by the Russian government so that it could have a monopoly over the Russian exports. However, this made other energy companies feel insecure. For example, Rosneft has actual assets in the border areas between Russia and China. And also Rosneft has been the country which has been engaging with Asia much more than Gazprom. Gazprom had a European passion. So now when it seems that Rosneft, which should have been given an upscale, because it has been engaging with Russia for a long time. It has more experience with Asia for a long time. However, Gazprom is still the preferred choice of the Russian government, and that has created problems. Also, because of this, what has happened is that it has become a Gazprom ghetto, where whatever Gazprom says sometimes has to be agreed by the government, the Russian government, even if they do not feel that it is for the benefit of the government. Hence, the Russian domestic politics, the state energy companies are having a kind of a tussle with sometimes amongst themselves and sometimes with the government, which is not the case with China. Because when it comes to China, the Chinese government and the Chinese energy companies are working together. And most of the heads of the Chinese energy companies are also ministers or members of the Chinese government. Hence, there is not much friction between the two. But that is not the case in Russian domestic politics, because Russian energy companies seem to be a particular kind of lobby, and the Russian government seems to be another lobby. And often a balance is tried to be secured between the two countries. Then I think I also want to point about the Arctic issue. Arctic area has always been considered by Russia as their own backyard. And they always feel that if they do not invest in Arctic area, some or the other country might. And recently, we have seen that China has shown a lot of interest in engaging in upstream activities in Russia, especially in the Arctic Circle. So major Chinese investments have happened in the Arctic areas. However, Russians do not have any other options but to allow a country in collaboration with them to engage in Arctic area rather than some other country which would invest in Arctic area without their approval. So these are the various factors because of which it is felt the Russians are compelled to inch more towards China compared to other countries. Next, please. Gas gossips. Now, the reason I have titled it as gas as gossip is that there have been so many various gas deals between China and Russia that each deal has its own story to tell. So that is why I have listed a number of deals that happened between the two countries, as well as I have tried, I will try to juxtapose all of this in one framework so that we can understand what exactly is happening behind the gas deals between the two nations. First of all, it's Anta versus Anna. This is actually, An is for Angarsk and Ta is for Taching. So this is the pipeline which was supposed to be laid down between China and Russia, the Angarsk-Taching pipeline. And the other is Anna, the Angarsk-Nakdoka pipeline, which was to be supposed to happen between Russia and Japan. Now, in 1990s, Angarsk-Taching pipeline was proposed, as well as Angarsk-Nakdoka pipeline was proposed by Japan. But the Russians, they were at that point of time were much more in favor of Angarsk-Nakdoka pipeline rather than Angarsk-Taching pipeline. The reason for it was that Japan at that point of time was a much more developed country, had much more money, and had offered $7.5 billion for building up of this energy pipeline. However, things got sour when the Russian company Yukos, which was a private company, decided that it is going to collaborate with ExxonMobil, which was a US company. The Russians had a problem that a US company, ExxonMobil, would have a say in a pipeline which was between two countries, Russia and Japan. Hence, what happened eventually was that the two projects, the Angarsk-Taching and Angarsk-Nakdoka pipeline, got merged, and Rosneft was given in charge of the pipeline, and Yukos became the in charge of the supplying of oil. Then the other deal that happened in 2014 was the $400 billion gas deal that was very much famed and talked about at that point of time. There were 2-3 things which happened in this $400 billion 80 deal. One, it ensured that China would be given 38 BCM of gas, and Russia would be given $80 billion of investment from China. This deal single-handedly raised the Chinese demand of energy from Russia from 5 to 30% at that point of time. However, this was at the political level, the government level. But when it comes to the energy companies level, each energy company which was engaged in this also gained a lot. One, the LNG infrastructure that was laid out between the two countries helped, especially helped Sino gain a lot of advantage because it has assets in the Chinese border area. Secondly, PetroChina, CNPC, they were heavily suffering from Xi Jinping's no tiger, no flies will be spared during 2013-2014, and a lot of corruption charges were laid down against them. So this diversion helped them not only to get a Eurasian portfolio, but also somehow shifted that focus on them on corruption charges. And the third main important thing that happened was that up till now, the Altai route, the Western Siberian route, was open for China, whose oil fields on the Russian side had already been explored around. But Russia has a lot of reserves in the Eastern Siberian side, which had yet to be explored at that time. This 400 billion gas deal ensured that East Siberia opened up to China. Hence, 3 pipelines were laid down, the Power of Siberia Pipeline 1, where gas would be able to reach Shanghai via the Taixing and the Kovyakta fields, which was the East Siberian route. Then the Altai pipeline, or the POS2, was the Power of Siberia 2 pipeline, was where gas would be supplied to China via Mongolia. However, the problems in this deal was that a third country called Mongolia got involved. And Mongolia, the problem with Mongolia is that it's neither a resource-rich nation, nor it has money to buy Russian gas. Hence, the involvement of a third party was something that both the Russians and the Chinese came skeptic of, and hence they are not focusing much on this. However, this Altai pipeline, the POS2, would be providing 50 billion cubic meters of gas to China, which is equivalent to a Nord Stream 2 project, which was due to happen between Russia and Germany, but got stalled after the Ukraine invasion of Russia. Hence, whatever loss Russia was facing because of the shelving of the Nord Stream 2 project, this Altai pipeline kind of makes up for it for a Russian benefit. However, the involvement of Mongolia is an irritant between the two countries. Then Power of Siberia 3, the third line, this involves the route of this pipeline is from Sakhalin to China via Sea of Japan. And it engages Russian Far East. And it is in this POS3 where the two countries have decided that they would exchange. The exchange that would happen between them would not be in dollars, but it would be in national currencies. That is in yuan and in ruble. Then there is the Yamal LNG project, where PetroChina will receive gas from Russia via Jiangsu for 300 million tons. And the funding energy companies that are associated with this, and from Russian side, we have Novatek. And then from Chinese side, we have PetroChina. And also the Chinese Silk Fund, China Silk Road Fund, is also a major player in this Yamal LNG project. However, one thing to be noted in this entire gas deals is that an oil and gas dealing with between Russia and China is that while the supply of oil products between the two countries has declined down, the supply of crude oil has increased. That is, if I would say that supply of oil products, which was generally coming from the Altai pipeline route, the Western Siberian route, it has declined from 7.2 to 3.8%. And the crude supply of crude oil from the Eastern Siberian route has increased from 3.1% to 13.4%. While this is good for China, because as I said, Eastern Siberia has opened for them and they're getting crude imports from them. The problem for Russia is that no matter how much it denies, it is slowly inching towards becoming a raw material supplier of China, which domestically there is a debate that they fear that they do not want to become that. Next, please. I would like to talk about the Ukraine chapter, the Ukraine invasion of Russia, the Ukraine invasion by Russia, after which a lot of the dynamics have changed geopolitically, especially between Sino-Russia, China and Russia, and especially in terms of energy relations. Now, Russia had invaded Ukraine on 24th February, and Western sanctions were applied to. However, there is a catch in this situation. Western sanctions were applied very as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine. However, the application of these Western sanctions happened quite late. For example, for coal, the sanctions got applied by 10th of August 2022, and for oil, the sanctions got applied by 5th December 2022. The reason that it happened was that the European countries wanted to ensure that they could get a kind of supply, at least a quantitative kind of supply, so that their long, harsh winters could pass off easily and they are not left in a quandary. Hence, when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, what happened at that point of time was the European demand suddenly surged till December happened, entire 2022. And since contracts had already been signed and they were to be honored, so Russia could not refuse to pay them at the previous price, that is $3 to $4 MCA, which they were already paying. After Ukraine invasion, a lot of other countries like India and China, they were clamoring to get this, to get a bigger share in Russian oil and gas. And Russia realized that it could also, since it has found new buyers for its produce, they wanted to shift from Europe to Asia, which they eventually did. Another thing was that these Western sanctions, these sanctions were not embargoes, which means that they did not say that we will stop the supply completely. The sanction said that we will not buy Russian oil until and unless they agree to sell at $60 per barrel. Currently, Russia is selling at $95 per barrel. So after China, EU is the major, one of the largest buyer of Russian oil and gas. Hence, EU had collectively said that EU and of course US, that the Western countries, that we will not buy Russian oil until and unless they agree to sell at $60 per barrel. Russians didn't want to do that. However, Chinese used that amount to leverage the price in their favor, and they said that, okay, we will not force you to sell at $60 per barrel. However, we would want you to reduce, give a certain level of discounts. So we want you to reduce a certain level of price, and also we want that the exchange should happen in our national currency. So if the import in China pre-Ukraine invasion, that is 2021, was $52.1 billion from Russia, in 2022 itself, it became $81.3 billion. And the total, and both the countries, China and Russia, in 2022 declared themselves that they are going to engage in a no-limit partnership. 2021, the trade volume between the two countries was $100 billion. And when it came to 2022, the trade, just in 1 year, turned into $190 billion. And they had targeted that they would increase the trade volume between the two countries from $100 billion to $200 billion. And they managed to achieve that almost by engaging in a $190 billion trade. Then, so if I just focus on 2022 year, we could see that the crude export to China by Russia was, crude export to China by Russia was 1 million BPD, where Gazprom was for the first time paid, not in dollars, but it was paid in a 50-50 split of ruble and yuan. So we could say that we can say that now China-Russia relations has become less about the volume of the product, the volume of oil or volume of gas that is being supplied, but it has become more about how China wants a bigger share in the upstream activities of Russia. Given below, I have given some data about the total Chinese payments since European invasion, and we can see that although it seems $67 billion, 1.2 billion euros, and 7 billion euros money has been sent since paid by China since the invasion. However, when we see oil, in terms of volume, it hasn't increased much. From pre-invasion area to current, it has just been increased up to 8.3%. And in although the amount is much more in oil, also it has seen a 20% jump, but the maximum percent, the was has been 50%. Although for gas has been the lowest when compared to oil and coal. However, the volume increase has been 50%. And in which is for 2022, the data was that 6.5 million tons of LNG was supplied by Russia to China. And just in 1 month, March 2023, the trade exchange that happened between them was of $20 billion. And by May, it has increased to $94 billion. Hence, we can see that the two countries have now really working on this no limit partnership between the two countries. Next, please. So as I conclude, I would just like to say that Russia's Povortna-Vostok means pivot to Asia. So this pivot to Asia should not be limited to China only, and Russia should open up to more Asian partners who want to be friends with Russia, and not just economic friends, but also engage more proactively with other countries, so that it does not turn China into another one single largest buyer from them. Secondly, I feel that China should react with caution and should not repeat the same mistakes in the bilateral ties which Russians had done when they were functioning as USSR, and China was just a third world country. So thank you so much for listening to me, and I'm open to questions now.
Well, that was quite a tour de force, Prachi. I think you have taken us through a very, very long journey, and very systematically you have unfolded the history of the relationship and that brief historical phase. And I think the intricacies of this entire energy issue between them, I think you brought them out really, really well. I think on the whole, you appear to be because it seems to me that the energy issue is going to be a very strong binder, considering the upheaval. And I'm really glad you brought in the Ukraine angle, because it brings a very important aspect into the picture. So thank you very much. And let's see if there are, I can already see.
Yes, ma'am.
Supradeep, you can take over and.
Yes, ma'am. We have a question from Rakwesa.
Yeah.
He says that thanks for your nice presentation. His question is, what is the role played by Russian oligarchs in the oil industry? Who controls the Gazprom now?
Role played by Russia and Gazprom?
Yeah, role played by Russia oligarchs in the oil industry. Yeah. And for now, who controls the Gazprom?
Okay. Now, should we take a few questions and then?
Yeah, I think it would be better if we can take, say, a clutch of 2 or 3.
We don't have any questions in the chat box now, but we have one comment in the YouTube live streaming. That is from Mr. Jaydeep Gadavi. He is saying that a concept of petro-yuan seems to be emerging. CPEC and CPEC and BRICS expansion, as well as an alternate currency through it, might be helping the case. What impacts it might have on oil trade for the rest?
Okay. So, role played by Russian oligarchs, as has been asked. Now, Russian oligarchs, they have a major lobby there in energy terms, and they are generally backed up by one or the other the president of Russia, whosoever is there. So we had Gorbachev, and then we had now we have Putin. So now we could say that there was an era of Gorbachev and his supporters, and now we have the Putin loyalists who are dealing with this. For example, you have somebody called Igor Sechin. Now, Igor Sechin is one person who shares a lot, who used to share a lot of camaraderie with Putin, because they are from the same area in Russia, and also because Igor Sechin has moved forward. In energy. He's an energy honcho, and he has really moved forward, played his cards well in engaging with Russia, with China, and with Chinese energy companies, both at the company level as well as the ministry level. So I feel that Russian oligarchs do play a very major role in especially in the domestic politics of Russian energy companies. However, they are often do not have a similar vantage point in the sense that, for example, currently it is the era of Putin loyalist because Putin is at the helm of the powers. And Putin himself is an energy expert because in 97, he himself wrote a dissertation on Russian energy sources. And he had very strongly said at that point of time that Russian present energy reserves are the key to its future prospects. So currently it is an era of, so we could say that Russian energy oligarchs and those who are sitting in the government, they have a very close connection. So whosoever comes to power, he brings in his own set of loyalists who have terms, who have terms and are connected with the Russian energy companies, either directly or indirectly. And Gazprom, I'm not aware who's currently holding it, but Gazprom again has been a European bastion throughout. So Gazprom has currently lost major of its supply because Gazprom had a major market in Europe and Rosneft had a major market in China. However, the Russian government is currently promoting Gazprom so that it can shift towards so that it can shift to get more assets in the border areas and can launch back and find more markets. Also, Gazprom and Rosneft are also trying to find a way into India. So, I mean, the Russian government is really supportive of Gazprom and are ensuring that the market that it lost in Europe, some way or the other, it's redeemed in Asia. And Petro Yuan, as you said, a few years ago, I think 10 years ago down the line, before, we had something called petrodollars, which was a major thing. But since China has now taken a very strong stand that it wants to engage in national currency, which was on papers legally declared between Russia and China since 2019, but it got implemented in this when Gazprom was paid in ruble and yuan in 2022. So we can see that yes, petro yuan is not just something that is of the future. It has begun to happen, and we may see more of petro yuan happening as like petrodollars was happening.
Dr. Gowal, we don't have any questions right now. So,
no more questions. So, okay, then I'll come in with another one, Prachi, so that we can take full advantage of your presence. So, you did not speak much about what is going to be the response of the West. And how does the American now strategy pan out, given, so there's not only, say, a powerful geopolitical kind of a configuration emerging, but there's also this problem about energy, which is a major requirement of the West also. And as you know, Europe is feeling completely now at a crossroads, that how do they continue to get the Russian energies which they badly need, and where do they get the alternatives? So America is going to find it very difficult to keep pushing Europe in this matter. So how do you think the, I mean, it's just pure kind of, let's say, analysis of the US and Western response to this romance of the two kingdoms?
Ma'am, actually, the thing is that, as I said before, that much before China, EU was one of the major buyers of Russia. And even after this Ukraine invasion has happened, still, if we look at the 2022 data, EU has slipped down, but only it has become the second largest partner. It is next only to China. So EU is still buying a bulk load of energy reserves from Russia. However, that does not really showcase in the media much. But the only thing that is highlighted has been the Western sanctions. Now, when it comes to USA, USA has, I say, a two-pronged approach to it. One, it is not stopping Europe from executioning of its energy deals between the two nations. However, in front of all, it has maintained a very hard stand that we are in support of Ukraine, and hence we do not support Russia. So there are two-pronged approaches. One is that politically they are against Russia, but however, since they realize that they cannot do away, I mean, they cannot find too soon an alternative for Russian energy, hence they are allowing, they are not saying anything to whatever, I mean, they have closed their eyes to whatever the exchange between Europe and Russia is happening.
Okay, I think Rapaiji has got another question. Rapaiji, would you like to come in and just ask?
Yeah, I think I will just, it is not question. I just want to supplement what you are telling. If you look at what is happening right now, a lot of oil and gas is still flowing to Europe. Either it is refined in some other places, including in India and China. The oil is still flowing to other countries, Russian oil. Another thing, to Praji, one thing I would like to know, are you following the pipelines politics? Because there's a lot of pipelines, I think still some of the pipelines towards gas and oil still flowing to the neighboring countries of Russia. And what is the arrangement? I don't know, but Ukraine war hasn't stopped all this, not stopped all the supply. Some contracts and some of the long-term contracts are still going on. Thank you.
Yes, sir. So I totally agree with you. Some of the Ukraine war has not really impacted a lot of the overland pipeline transport because it is not affecting in any way the construction or any other factor. So this Power of Siberia Pipeline 1, it has it has begun operations at a few places. Also, sir, there are 2-3 kinds. 2022, Russia had declared that they are going to export to China 1 million crude. But the problem is that there are 2 kinds of things. One, that the data that I just mentioned that I had written in my last slide, it is from the customs data of China, because Russia has stopped publishing their customs data since April 2022. So this is 1 million BPD. That was that 2022 data was there. This was the disclosed amount which the Chinese are saying that we are taking it from Russia. However, there are some media reports which say that a lot of other through some other routes, the Russian oil and gas is going to China to undisclosed destinations which have not been highlighted. So these are the pipelines, the data that we know are in existence because they have been disclosed by the 2 countries. And this is the data that has been provided to us by the Chinese customs. However, we are not aware because Russians are not publishing, so there is no way to corroborate since April 2022. Also, we are not aware that where these undisclosed locations are, as has been mentioned in various other media reports. So we are just hoping for the future to unfold so that we are aware that we may get to know that where these undisclosed locations lie.
Do you have any information about the refinery which Russia were planning to set up in our Gujarat coast? Is that work is going on?
Sir, I have not really focused on Russia-India relations vis-a-vis energy because my focus here was on Russia.
Yeah, I understand that perfectly. But anything come to your notice, that is only. Because Russia was ready to fund the refinery in our western coast.
So I am not aware about that currently.
Okay. Fine.
Dr. Agarwal, we have 2 questions from Ms. Maheshwari. Her first question is that what could be the role of Ukraine issue in the Sino-Russian relations? And the next question is how Sino-Russian bonhomie play in terms of energy security issues for a country like India, since India had invested in far east of Russia.
Okay. First of all, what role Ukraine could play is something I had discussed in length in my last slide, the second last slide, that the Ukraine issue has, if anything, I would say, has strengthened the relations between the two countries. It has catapulted China into becoming the largest trading partner of Russia, as well as it has increased their trade from directly from $100 billion to $200 billion, and they are now exchanging in national and in their own national currencies. So Ukraine invasion has single-handedly brought the two countries so closer that they have openly declared themselves to establishing a no-limit partnership, which is almost in tune with like something called all-weather friendship, which China shares with Pakistan. And secondly, in terms of what it stands for India, I feel that Ukraine invasion for India, it brought more benefit to India than to China, because China was already working on investment with Russia since the 2014 400 billion gas deal, as well as Xi Jinping visiting Central Asia in 2012 when he first became the president of China. So China really did not gain much from Ukraine in the sense that invasion happened and their trade dealings began, their terms of trade began to change, did not change much in terms of, let us say, volume. It did change in terms of value, but it did not change much in terms of volume. In fact, for India, it brought a better advantage because Russia suddenly now realized that their Port Vostok should also go beyond China to Japan. Then Vietnam is an ally of Russia, so Russia to Vietnam as well as to India, and India became the new entrant to this entire juxtaposition. So I feel that in Sino-Russian bonhomie in terms of countries like India and China does not have such a strong role that it can dictate Russia to not engage with countries which it does not like, because be it Vietnam, be it India, or even Japan, China does not share a good relation with any of the countries. However, they have all been staunch Russian allies. So I very strongly feel that for India, it has also brought good opportunities for India.
All right. So are there any more questions?
No, ma'am, not in the chat box or in the YouTube as well.
Well, I think then people have got a lot of food and for thought and ideas to chew on. I think, Prachi, you have laid out a very, very interesting framework to look at this relationship. And
Ma'am, we have a question from Akshat. So he is saying that Japan has kept a close watch on deepening ties between Russia and China, given the evolving dynamics in the region and rising tensions between Russia, China, and Japan. So could you please elaborate a little on how this growing relationship has had or may have an effect on Japan's reliance on Russian energy, especially through Sakhalin?
Sakhalin, did you say?
Yes, ma'am. Sakhalin, especially through
Okay,
Sakhalin.
Okay. The Sakhalin oil fields. Okay. Russian Far East, as I specified, the Power of Siberia 3 pipeline, which has not much come in terms. It has not been spoken about much. The Power of Siberia pipeline will be supplying through the Sea of Japan, and it is from the Sakhalin oil fields to Japan. Now, the problem is that Japan's economy is also aging. Hence, it cannot compete much in terms of the volume of trade relations when it comes to vis-a-vis China. However, I do feel that, as we said, that the Angars-Naktoka pipeline and Angars-Taching pipeline have collaborated. So if Japan wants, I think Japan can only, if it's my take, that Japan, instead of trying to compete with China on energy terms, what it could do best is to join it as a triangle and turn it into a trilateral relationship between the two countries, since they really share close borders with each other, so that it can, so whatever the overland pipelines are being laid down, it can also gain benefit from it.
All right, Akshat, does that address your query?
He said that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I think, Prachi, I will also thank you on my behalf, and Supradeep, you can wrap up the Wednesday seminar today.
Okay, ma'am, sure. So with this, we would wrap up the session and thank all the panelists for giving us their precious time. The video of today's discussion will be available on ICS YouTube platform. We would also like to welcome everyone to the next Wednesday seminar on a comparative assessment of the greening process in China and India. We at the ICS conduct seminars every Wednesday, and information related to the same will be available on the ICS website, or you could also subscribe to our newsletter for the regular updates. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ICS, for having me here.
Thank you, Prachi. It's scholars like you who make us feel very happy about